Welcome back to Left in the Attic. I'm Anna.
I'm Deep. Today we're talking about the direction of the Democratic Party, the failures of National Democrats around the shutdown, the housing crisis, and more.
For those joining on YouTube, you can see that we have a special guest today.
Representative Javier Mabrey. He represents House District 1, which is the southwest part of Denver. He's had a really amazing story. He was homeless, built himself up, went to Berkeley Law School, and now defends tenants, renters, those who are trying to find homes in this housing crisis, both as an eviction defense attorney and at the state capitol. Some would say, Javi, you're probably one of the most successful progressives we've had, some of the best progressive legislations around renters' rights and tenants' rights. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
I noticed that you're wearing a Broncos jersey. You're a Colorado native, right?
That's right.
How do you think the Broncos season's going? Do we have any hope?
We're going to win. We're going to win the division. We're 9-2 right now. We're currently beating the Chiefs. If we beat the Chiefs, I think it's going to be hard for anybody else to win the division. So, best season we've had in a really long time. Exciting.
Do you think, as we were just mentioning, that you're a housing attorney, this is the area you focus on, how do you feel about the Bronco Stadium being relocated into the Santa Fe Art District Hudson Yards area? Anna, have you been following this?
Wait, they're relocating the Bronco Stadium?
Yeah, so they're relocating the Bronco Stadium and building a new one because they cannot host the Super Bowl right now. You cannot host the Super Bowl unless you have a dome stadium. So they're going to spend, who knows, $2 billion to build a new stadium. At first, I was really skeptical about this. I went to the Broncos game last week. Our current stadium is fine. But I learned that they're not going to use any public funds to build the new stadium. That makes me feel better about it. A lot of football teams get these sweetheart deals with the cities they're located in where we're spending money helping these multi-billion-dollar companies build stadiums. People are homeless and our schools are underfunded, but it seems like we're not going to be spending government resources on it. So I guess I'm cool with it. It would be kind of cool for Denver to get the Super Bowl.
So it's going to be a dome, though. Like, do you know if the dome's going to open? Do we know that?
I don't think we've seen designs yet.
No, we just know the location of it, which is Hudson Yards.
What year is it made?
We'll bring someone on who's an expert in the Hudson Yards area for the Broncos game. Anna, Javi, how was your last week?
Well, I do want to say, Left in the Attic pod officially launched this last week, so that was really exciting. Huge thanks to Deep on that. He's the one behind the scenes making it happen. Honestly, it was really exciting to have the launch this week. That was probably a highlight for me. But yeah, I don't know. It was a rough week for me personally. I'll say it.
What happened?
I think we're kind of at that point in the year. I lost my job officially in August, and I've been grinding an idea since. When you go through any life change, they say that your life goes from order to disorder to reorder. I've been trying to embrace this reorder of life, but in navigating a career pivot with everything being so uncertain, I sometimes have the tendency to overwork to try to create certainty or give me control in a situation. I just burnt out Wednesday, woke up low energy, and have just been trying to get my spark back. But I think it's back, actually. I'm feeling good today.
Good.
First time since Wednesday, which I'm usually a happy, optimistic person. So it's weird when something knocks me off the horse.
Yes. Javier, what was your last week like?
I started last week in Alamosa. Senator Julie Gonzalez, David Seligman, and I drove down to Rio Grande County to attend the Del Norte Democrats annual JFK dinner. That was amazing. Rio Grande County is one of the most Republican counties in the state. After the dinner, we went out to local bars and just talked to people who lived in the town. A woman shared her story with us about how her husband had passed away and how she's dealing with grieving. She shared some stories about how she's a victim of a crime and has a case going on right now. It was really cool to talk to people about what they're actually going through. We had a town hall in Pueblo where we talked to a lot of union members, working class folks about the attorney general's race. That was empowering. Otherwise, my week was pretty tough. I work as a renters' rights attorney. That work is really stressful right now. I know we're going to talk about the housing crisis, but so many of our neighbors are one emergency away from being kicked out of their homes, and I see it every week, and that has an impact on me. We're living through this onslaught of attacks on democracy, our basic freedoms. Scary times.
As you saw, 2 weeks ago, we also had the election.
I'm really excited to have Javi here today with us. One of the things that really sticks out. So I met Javi, I guess it's been like a year ago.
Yeah, maybe 2, yeah.
Went to Barcelona Wine Bar, which is the loudest bar in all of Colorado.
It's a chain, but there's one in Boston, one in D.C.
If you've ever been to Barcelona and Rhino, it is so loud. I just remember...
It has vibes.
It does have vibes. Great hating on it, yeah.
We went on Monday night at 8 p.m. and
It was-
I remember we barely got a table. I was like,
Yeah.
what is this? Who are all these people here? It's a Monday. It was after a fundraiser we had for a political candidate. I see Javi always very consistent. I appreciate your moral courage as someone representing Democrats, always saying the true thing out loud and standing with the people. I feel like every time I've seen that we have some sort of strike or unionizing event, you're always there. I love that, and I'm excited to have you on. And
Thanks.
I would love to hear more about your story.
I was raised in South Denver by a single mom whose only source of income was her Social Security disability check, and we were really poor. I know what it's like to get your power cut off because you've ran behind on the bills. I know what it's like to get your water cut off. I remember walking down to the Safeway close to our house to fill jugs of water on the outside of the Safeway with the spigot they use to water flowers in the spring so that we could flush our toilets. Know what it's like to rely on food banks? Our food banks play such a vital role in our communities, but for the people that rely on them, they are not good enough. I know what it's like to go to a food bank and leave with 6 cans of green beans, a bag of hot dog buns, and a sheet cake. It's tragic that in the wealthiest country on earth, so many people rely either on SNAP or food banks. It's a reflection of how broken our system is. When I was a teenager, my mom, my brother, and I were evicted from our home. We were homeless. We lived out of the back of my mom's 1999 Chevy Suburban with our dogs, mostly living in Motel 6s. And then we moved to Norman, Oklahoma, which is where my mom is from originally. And shortly after moving there, I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, took a job washing dishes at the local hospital. I decided that I wanted to go back to school to pursue a career helping families like mine when Barack Obama was running for president.
You worked as an organizer for Obama, right?
I did work as an organizer for Obama. I worked my way through community college as a pizza delivery driver, dishwasher, organizer on the Obama campaign, and then eventually went to law school. Now I represent renters who are facing eviction.
That's amazing. And so it sounds like your life is exactly what the Democrats want to be, right? The working class, people who have been brought down by a broken system, who are trying to fight for that. But we've seen in these last 2 weeks, and this is something that we talked about in the last episode, that it looks like the Democratic Party is having sort of almost a civil war, you could say, right? And I know your Twitter is quite active. You've been mentioning a couple of these things that you see that there's maybe the corporate wing of the Democratic Party and another wing that's actually fighting for the working class. Where do you see the future of the Democratic Party going?
Our democracy is in crisis because people have lost faith in the ability of government to improve their lives. So earlier I was talking about how I see my clients every day who were one emergency away from being on the brink of homelessness. We also see this in the data. Since 1970, almost all the wealth that has been created in this country has gone to people who are already very wealthy. That's why we're living in a system where 63% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. 69% of people have less than $1,000 in their bank accounts. When the Democratic Party abandoned the fight for working class voters, of course, Donald Trump won. We were not going to win over working class people in a system where my generation is the first generation since World War II to be worse off than my parents' generation by running on generic platitudes. And we face a choice right now. Are we going to be a party that is about maintaining the status quo that is benefiting oligarchs and billionaires? Or are we going to be a party that is loudly and openly fighting for systematic changes? In the wealthiest country on earth, are we going to openly say everybody has a right to healthcare? Everybody has a right to housing in this country. Those are things that we can do. But right now, we need to choose if we're going to elect leaders that are prioritizing that or vague tax credits and tweaking a system that is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you're saying that. Oftentimes, when we're talking to other Democrats, I feel like people are like, oh, I do want more health care for people. I do want more housing for people. But then it becomes all these things like you were saying, tweaking on the edges. They're like, oh, we can't actually do anything big or bold. And if we do something big or bold, people will be upset with us, which is so annoying considering where we are politically right now, where Donald Trump won. I don't even think he actually got 50% of Americans to vote for him. He won the popular vote. He got more votes than Kamala Harris did. But even with the slimmest of election wins, they are ruling this country like they have a mandate. Meanwhile, Democrats, even when they're winning in places like Colorado, we had a supermajority in the House and nearly a supermajority in the state Senate. We've been a trifecta for so many years. We're still just tinkering on the edges, and so frustrating. I do agree, though. I think there might be this battle in 2026 in particular about which direction we're going.
I believe that here in the state of Colorado, we have done more as Democrats in the legislature than just tinker around the edges. Since I've been elected, we've passed Just Cause for Eviction, one of the most progressive renters' rights bills in the country. Last year, the legislature at least ended the Labor Peace Act. We passed the Worker Protection Act. Colorado is basically a right-to-work state where it's really hard to form a union. Unanimously, the Democrats in the legislature voted to end that, and Governor Polis vetoed it. Those are two examples of big fights we've taken on at the state level. One of them is having an active impact on people's lives, and I see it every single day. Another shows that in the legislature, we're willing to walk the walk.
When Republicans run states, whether it's like Florida or North Carolina, they are doing transformational things to society. When we take power, we're kind of tinkering the edges. If we had a majority of Javier Mabrys at the state legislature, this is not the policies we would be passing, right? We would be doing bigger things for the working class.
The first bill I ran was a rent stabilization policy. Just Cause for Eviction is great policy to stabilize people, doesn't actually address the affordability issue where we're living in a world where corporate landlords are price gouging. They're using a hidden algorithm to fix the price of rents. We need rent stabilization. That is the type of policy we would be looking at. We would also be looking at increasing taxes on the wealthy. There are 100 billionaires who live in Aspen. We have some of the most expensive real estate in the country, and that expensive real estate has some of the lowest taxes on it. Our schools are underfunded. We, during the pandemic, because of ARPA funds, were able to basically stop non-payment of rent evictions through the emergency rental assistance program. We could solve non-payment of rent evictions by fully funding the emergency rental assistance program. There are much bigger steps we could and should take. The influence of the lobby and wealthy campaign donors makes Democrats trim their sails and talk one talk to their voters and another to their donors.
What I'm hearing mostly is the Democratic Party needs to go towards progressive policies to make things more affordable, focusing on affordability.
It has to mean something. The Republicans say they care about affordability. Having a specific plan, how exactly are you going to address affordability? Do you support laws that make it easier to form a union? I will say that our two candidates for governor haven't said so yet. Do you support policies that cap the price of rent or stabilize the price of rent? Or are you just talking about affordability on the campaign trail without clear, specific plans?
When people start talking about policies to make things more affordable, people start to have that rhetoric of like, well, who's going to pay for it? Nobody's asking who's paying for ICE, the $100 billion in the big, beautiful bill, all of the money being poured into the infrastructure, the administration, and the oversight, all of that.
ICE, under the big, beautiful bill, would be the second most expensive military in the entire world. We spend more on ICE than most countries do on their military.
It's crazy. It just blows my mind if we were to turn that towards making sure that people have enough food to eat, affordable housing.
The average taxpayer spends about $1,200 a year of their tax dollars to the 5 biggest defense contractors in the world. Yeah. Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. These companies are getting about $1,200 a year per taxpayer in subsidies. And we always hear Republicans and even some Democrats talk about how bad socialism is. We live in a socialist country. We have corporate socialism. Meanwhile, $218 per taxpayer goes to schools.
If we're dissecting the election that happened in 2024, and when I'm talking to a lot of my working class male friends, they actually thought that Trump was a peace candidate. Donald Trump was saying we should spend much less money on war. Republicans are okay with subsidies and stuff, but I also feel like there's this pro-war part of the Democratic Party as well, and that's especially in the national level. We're in local politics, so if you're really not voting for war or anything, but I think that's a distinguished thing that you do see amongst the Democratic Party right now, whether it's someone like Zohran Mamdani who's like, I want to focus on New York City, I want to focus on local stuff, versus other people who are trying to still do regime change, whether it's in Venezuela or in the Middle East.
It's clear that Donald Trump was lying about all that stuff. And we know that now because he bombed Iran. He's killing innocent people in Venezuela. I agree with you. I was disturbed when Kamala Harris, during her acceptance speech at the DNC, said something along the lines of, the United States Armed Forces will be the most lethal. Yeah. That does not reflect my values at all. Part of what got me into politics was the backlash to the Bush years, neoconservatism, the Patriot Act, and the war on terror. The thing that catapulted Barack Obama to winning the Democratic nomination in 2008 was his anti-Iraq war stance. That's what gave him credibility with our voters. Neither party was the peace party in the last election. I knew Donald Trump was bullshitting and lying, but it's disturbing that we ever gave him the opportunity to outflank us. Maybe it was a really bad closing strategy to tour the country with Liz Cheney, the daughter of the architect of the war on terror and the torture memo. Made it feel like, do we believe in anything other than winning?
I'm learning so much every episode. Before we switch gears, is there anything else that we think the Democratic Party needs to focus on moving forward?
I think one of the things we wanted to talk about with the Democratic Party nationally, it seems like a lot of folks are sick and tired of Chuck Schumer ever since the shutdown debate happened. Senators Hickenlooper and Bennett are even being tied into that. Did you see this poll that came out recently? There's a poll that said Bennett and Hickenlooper have pretty large disapproval ratings, larger than you would expect. And now you're also seeing nationally there's a large amount of disapproval ratings with Chuck Schumer. So it seems like people are getting sick of these national Democrats at the national level, but it's bleeding down to Hickenlooper and Bennett. Do you think Bennett and Hickenlooper could be in trouble? Bennett's running for governor now, and Hickenlooper's running for re-election.
When you dig into the data on those polls, what it shows is the reason why both of them are underwater is they have between a 25 and 30% disapproval rating within their own party. Typically, that's not something that happens. Brown or Democratic senator has 85 to 95% approval rating from their own voters. That is reflective of the difference between the policy preferences of voters and politicians. Our friend David Seligman has a great line where he talks about how one of the scary things about campaigning is the thing that candidates spend most of their time doing is trying to get people on the phone who could give them $500 or more on a cold call. The fundamental problem facing our society is that most voters don't have $500 to deal with an emergency expense. And so to run for office, you need to spend most of your time talking to people who are positioned differently than the vast majority of voters. Politicians get caught in these echo chambers where they're hearing about a reality that does not exist. We're seeing that in their disapproval ratings. I'll also note that Governor Polis had a similarly low approval number, with the most important gap being that he's lost 25 to 30% of Democratic voters. We had one of the biggest fights for union rights in 30 years in the state of Colorado. Hickenlooper Bennett, silent. Polis vetoed it.
Polis is someone who's been focused on this affordability crisis as well, as he puts it, and he says he's trying to solve it through the abundance mindset.
The idea is that rich people can continue to rake in money hand over fist, and in a system like that, everybody can benefit.
Essentially, Polis and folks like Ezra Klein, they're part of this abundance movement right now. They're packaging themselves as an abundance movement, saying the reason we're in a housing crisis in Denver and across this nation is because we have a lack of supply, and we've not let corporations or developers build enough. I'm a YIMBY, so I'm a little bit in the boat that we do have a lot of red tape, and we definitely need to build. What is a YIMBY? Yes, in my backyard. Which is the opposite of a NIMBY, which is no in my backyard, which are folks who try to prevent housing being built. What I'm trying to get at, Javi, that I think it's a interesting distinction that I would love for you to kind of tease into a little bit is Jared Polis is saying that, I'm being a housing first governor, right? I'm trying to build as much housing as possible by cutting this bureaucratic red tape. Meanwhile, your big legislations are either getting stopped or vetoed by him and his allies. Why do you think that is?
Well, first off, I believe deeply with the people pushing the abundance agenda that it is too hard to build housing, which is why I have been a co-sponsor on almost all of the legislation that Governor Polis has been pushing to make it easier to build housing. Of course, I believe it should be easier to build housing. I do gotta say, on one point, the governor wasn't an obstacle. He did sign the Just Cause for Eviction bill, and I do got to give him a shout out for that. I agree with Governor Polis on a lot of housing issues. We disagree on a few fundamental pieces, right? Which is basically the demand side of the curve. What are you doing to protect renters? The idea that if we just unleash the market, then all of our problems will be solved is the goal of investors in housing isn't to provide housing to poor people. It's to generate profits for shareholders. So groups like the Colorado Apartment Association can and never will be true partners in making housing affordable. They represent the same corporate landlords that the Trump Department of Justice just made a settlement with for using a price fixing algorithm.
Well, I heard something about this. They use different data, like how many people are looking for housing, like machine learning, use the data to increase the prices as people are looking for housing.
Well, what's happening with the RealPage algorithm is going back to Teddy Roosevelt days. We passed antitrust laws that said Coke and Pepsi cannot get into a room, show each other their books, and then say, hey, we agree that it looks like consumers will pay $3.50 for a bottle of Coke and Pepsi, so we're both going to charge $3.50. What's happened is that smoke-filled back room is being replaced by an algorithm where these companies are giving these landlords information to a company called RealPage. RealPage is uploading everything from the market in and then recommending prices to landlords. And even the Trump Department of Justice wrote this scathing press release after they entered into a settlement with landlords like Greystar, Colorado's biggest member of the apartment association, saying that this technology was being used to price gouge our neighbors. In addition to building more, we also need to recognize that at a certain point, the people who want to build don't want prices to go down because they need to preserve a certain return on investment. So yes, let's make it easier to build more, but also let's regulate the prices of rent so that housing is affordable. We can do that and preserve a massive profit margin for landlords.
When I hear all this talk, I'm getting hyped in terms of like, oh yeah, of course, let's fight against corporate landlords, people who are price fixing. But at the same time, it sounds like, oh, this should be sort of a layup in a blue place like Denver, like Colorado. We should be able to organize and really do it for the working class. But what are the obstacles you two think that are happening that stop the average person, the average voter, from actually exercising the political power that they have?
Money in politics.
Yes.
David Sirota just wrote a book called Master Plan. David Sirota worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign. His most important title is he is the husband to the great Emily Sirota, my colleague, chair of the Joint Budget Committee. David is an incredible journalist. He founded a network called The Lever. The Lever just released this book called Master Plan, and it charts from a Supreme Court case called Buckley v. Vallejo, where John Bolton, The same John Bolton, the mustachioed national security guy, built this case that established the principle that money is speech. From there, we've ended with Citizens United, and now corporate interests can spend unlimitedly in elections. We've reached a place where speech can be bought. There's only so much airtime, right? You can buy the loudest megaphone and drown folks out. And we see that happening here in Colorado, where corporate-backed Democratic candidates get more money in their campaigns than grassroots candidates. Even though they're corporate-backed, their mailers say they're the progressive candidate. That has made this system really difficult to navigate, but I believe that's starting to change. Look at the Denver school board races. The union candidates were outspent 6-1, and they won. I think they won because people did their homework and looked to see who the teachers union was backing. New York City, Zoran Mondani was outspent 50-1, and he won. And so I am hopeful that voters are starting to wake up to this broken system. I'm going to quote Zoran here. He said, "Tonight, voters rejected the politics of big money and small ideas." And yesterday, I was riffing on that line, and I added another thing to it. Voters need to reject the politics of big money, small ideas, and generic platitudes.
We should have enough progressives that Javier Mabry becomes the moderate in the Democratic House.
I would love that.
All right, we need to get back to huge news from this week, which was that the shutdown ended. Anybody want to talk about the failures of...
As a federal worker, are you still in contact with a lot of your friends at the federal government?
Yeah, I actually, well, if I had my phone right now, I would share. They sent the email. I have a screenshot of the email that they sent out titled, I think, to government employees saying the Democratic government-led shutdown has ended. It was like one line saying they were returning to the office, but it also said something, again, with the Democratic-led government shutdown. Like, it's just wild to see this rhetoric as being sent out on official government channels. They went back to work this week, and I keep in contact with a lot of current feds, more agencies than just CDC. I need to check back in with them and see how they're doing. I mean, if we were to take a temperature check of how feds are doing, they're not doing good.
Luckily, I think they are getting back pay, but this whole Democratic shutdown, it's so frustrating. It's sort of like a larger ecosystem of the failures I see in the Colorado legislature, the Colorado Democrats here. And Javi, I get that your job is to share for the successes and the wins and find them where they are. That's what makes you really successful. It's the similar thing that's happened at the national level, where we had a handful of conservative Democrats with some backing of people behind the scenes that said, hey, we're going to cave. Even though we just had huge election wins on Tuesday, people are getting really upset at this shutdown. We don't want to get rid of the filibuster. And because of that, we are going to just cave to Donald Trump. It's a frustrating thing that Democrats are more worried about delivering and having this idea like, oh, if we deliver, maybe the voters will be mad at us and we'll get voted out. But instead, they don't deliver, hoping to keep their status quo as a small minority party. That's my take on the situation. I'm not sure how you two feel about it.
The first thing that's worth acknowledging is there clearly is no bottom to the depths of cruelty that the Trump administration was willing to inflict upon our most vulnerable neighbors in that shutdown in the hopes of blaming it on Democrats. He got an out. There was a court that said you should issue EBT. And then he was fighting to the Supreme Court saying, no, actually, we don't want to do that.
It sounded like we were winning the shutdown fight. Democrats had just won huge election results.
Yeah, they were winning. It is incredibly rare that the party that doesn't have the presidency wins the narrative during a government shutdown. Let's talk about what they were actually doing. I think the two best messengers on what the shutdown was about were AOC and Bernie Sanders.
Hey, shout out.
AOC and Bernie Sanders were clearly and crisply saying, we are not going to continue funding the government when millions of Americans are going to see their healthcare premiums double, triple, quadruple. We're seeing some of this in Colorado where people who are paying $300 a month are going to have to pay $1,200, $1,300, $2,000 a month to maintain healthcare coverage. By the way, I do just want to put out there, it is incredibly messed up that we have a healthcare system that depends on subsidizing private companies so that premium prices are lower. Isn't it so clear that we're just giving money to a corporate middleman? Now, that's something that we need to fix. But I believe that we were making the case strongly and clearly to voters that we were standing up and fighting for people who were going to lose healthcare coverage or face bankruptcy. And that message was resonating. And then we caved. The worst thing about, 6 Democrats caved. I hope that the voters are able to see that nuance. I wonder that it just looks like the Democrats caved. Think about how that looks to Donald Trump. If you are Democrats and saying, hey, we're going to fight you to the end, he's going to think you're going to cave every single time. We need new leadership. We support Ro Khanna's call to replace Schumer.
We wanted to touch a little bit on the housing crisis, and Javier works with renters every day.
I think that local elected officials, national elected officials are really detached from how most everyday people are experiencing the housing crisis. You would think in the state capitol, when we're debating a renters protection issue, that 50% of the state is landlords and 50% is tenants. The reality is 45% of the state is renters and about 7% of the state is landlords. Our poorest neighbors likely are paying more in rent than most elected officials are paying for their mortgages.
I do think it's so crazy when I've talked to folks who are like, my rent is $2,500, but for some reason I can't be approved for a $2,500 mortgage.
Yeah.
And this is something that's happening all across our generation right now.
We have rent control in this country for everybody who's lucky enough to be able to own a home. I got a 30-year fixed rate on my mortgage. I can plan for 30 years if I want to raise a family, if I want to buy a second home. Renters do not have that luxury. They do not know how much their landlord is going to increase the rent year over year. I see renters who are priced out of the neighborhoods that used to be affordable in Denver, living in communities like Thornton, North Glen, Aurora. They live in 2 or 3 bedroom dilapidated apartments with bed bugs, roaches, mold, and they're paying $2,600.
Oh my God.
That is a very common occurrence. Imagine renting a 1 bedroom if you have kids. You can't.
As a former Denver public school teacher, like students of mine sleeping on recliners, like they didn't have a bedroom, or 2 boys in high school that I had as students that had to share, and their sister had a twin bed. The reality for families, they took in their cousins into their house, and they had 3 high school kids to 1 room. The parents had a room, and then they also took in other family members.
Well, I remember when I was a teacher, do you remember the house that I had with 4 other teacher friends?
Yes.
We had this massive teacher house. There's like 5 of us all live in this house. And my room must have been like, you could touch both walls if you did this, and I'm not that tall. If you're not watching, I'm extending my wingspan. Even for that place, I was paying like $450 on a teacher salary. Well, now that sounds cheap. Back then, as a teacher, I got paid like $35,000. Another crisis
That we hardly touched on.
One last thing about this, though, is when Deep lived there, they threw a housewarming party, and I think the toilet got clogged, and Deep was like in there with a plunger. I have a photo. We'll leak it eventually.
This is pre-beard Deep, which, by the way, was a totally different person.
The best part about doing a pod with somebody you've been friends with for a decade is like the dirt we have on each other is great.
You know, I was trying to find so many of the videos, but I feel like so much of our videos are on Snapchat, so they're gone.
I have them.
Oh, nice. Do you have the one that I'm in the car angry at you because you keep lying that you're 5'10"?
Yeah, we're gonna post my height video. This is what happens. Guys that say they're 5'11" are really 5'9".
I am 5'11".
Any guy that says they're 6 are 5'11", maybe 5'10". Like, you never really know. And as a 5'11" girly, I know this. Men always tell me, you're not 5'11", because I'm taller than them, and they think they're 5'11". And I'm like, how would I not know my own height? So that's what I have to say. And what are my motives for lying about it?
You're not single. Well, not newly. But
No, I've been dating somebody for a year. Yeah.
What, do you think it was harder to date in Denver as a young man or a young woman?
How did you guys meet, if you don't mind me being nosy?
I met my partner at a friend's party, which is so much better than the dating apps. A year before we actually started dating. Alejo.
Oh.
Alejo, yeah.
Shout out union organizers.
Yeah, it was Alejo's birthday party. And anyways, then like a year later, Alejo was like, how's your dating life going? And I was like, oh, not so good, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, hey, that girl from my birthday party thought you were cute. And so I just followed her on Instagram. And then like a coward, all I really did was like her stories. Finally, she asked me out. And I worked up the courage. I was like, all right, I'm going to DM her.
Slide into her DM.
Yeah, she slid into my DMs and was like, hey, I want to take you to dinner sometime. And then gave me her phone number and I texted her. She's also a union organizer. And she was like, hey, I'm thinking Saturday. By the way, this is a date, not a one-on-one. And I was like, yeah, I figured because you said Saturday night.
We'll bring her on the show. We'll have a union organizing show.
She would be great. She's actually headed to Chicago right now. She works for the National Education Association. They're having one of their big conferences. She works for the year-round organizing team. It's in Chicago. She's given like 5 presentations. She's super stressed about it. And I was like, they're making you present because you're charismatic.
I love an origin story of how people start dating. So
yeah.
In the Indian culture, the person who introduces you is called a vachola. It's an honorary matchmaking. There's someone who, if you ever have fights down the road, there's someone who tries to broker and all that. And you owe them a golden ring at your wedding.
So Alejo, you get a golden ring.
I also want to say that I did set up 2 of our friends. Like 4 dates going on 5,
Really?
I think. Ooh.
One of them might come on the podcast.
Oh.
Because he might run for office.
This is exciting. Action item for the week. Set your friends up, Single people in their 30s. You got to help other people out.
Yeah, no, totally.
If you see something in one person, you're like, I think that might be compatible with this person. Actually, one of my former colleagues went on a date and she was like, listen, this guy's actually too tall for me, but he might be great for you. I love this.
Perfect.
So that's
much better than the
apps.
apps. Although Zoran succeeded on the app.
Just saying, people set your friends up.
All right, bring us home, Anna.
Let's get into the call to action for the week, which I saw Instagram is where I see a lot of news, especially things that are just coming out that Starbucks employees are organizing. Javi, do you know about that? I usually try to support my local mom and pop coffee shops regardless, but I think right now, especially going to the holiday season, there's always those classic winter beverages at Starbucks, and I'm pretty sure we're boycotting right now.
Starbucks workers are standing up to try to fight for better pay, better working conditions. Some are fighting to get their unions recognized. This is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, tied to the labor movement. And almost all of the policies that people love, the 40-hour work week, paid time off, stuff like that has been won by unions. This ties back to the previous conversation. I was glad to see Michael Bennett and John Hickenlooper issue a statement standing in solidarity with the Starbucks.
What is Michael Bennett and Hickenlooper? The only reason they all of a sudden, if you haven't been following this closely, Michael Bennett and Hickenlooper have always been very centrist, very corporate Democrat. Now that they're finally running and have more left-wing opposition, now they're at picket lines being like, hey, how do you do, fellow kids? We've always been here. I appreciate the switch. But it is frustrating to see this disingenuousness, and I hope voters can see through that.
Well, I'll just add, both of them were silent last year when we had our biggest fight for worker rights in the history of the state. If you see one of them on a picket line, ask them if they support the Worker Protection Act, because that's actually the thing that we can do here in the state of Colorado to best protect workers. We need to expand collective bargaining rights.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah. Also, we're going to have Javi back on and maybe other 2 like union organizers and such, but to chat about unions and people power. But I did want to mention that my grandpa started and organized a union, so I'll have to brush up on the details of the story. And we're really grateful, Javier, that you came on, joined us today, shared all your knowledge.
Thank you, Javi, for coming. Really appreciate it. Left in the Attic is a podcast brought to you by us in our attic. Shout out to our graphic designer and person helping out with our websites, Jessie Broom. She's amazing. Shout out. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Subscribe wherever else there's podcasts. Tell your friends. Leave a review. Thank you.